theyeshiva.net.
There's a teaching that's attributed to the great Kabbalist, to the Arizal, who says that the word machshava, the word thought, mem, ches, shin, veis, hey, is the same letters like the word besimcha, with joy. Machshava and besimcha are exactly the same letters, right? Machshava is mem, ches, shin, veis, hey, and besimcha is beis, sin, mem, ches, hey, just in a different configuration. So besimcha is machshava, which of course is teaching us something. And that is that it has to do with our mindset. It has to do with how we think about life. There are two ways of thinking about life. There is how happiness thinks, and there is how depression thinks, or how sadness thinks. And it's critical that we develop a mindset of machshava, which is besimcha, because it always begins with my thought processes. As it says in Tanya, every single emotion that we experience, every emotion that we experience, every sensation that we experience in our body, everything that we experience is always preceded by a thought. It doesn't come in a vacuum. There's always a machshava that precedes it. That's what it says in Tanya. And that thought is rooted in a certain inner idea, in a certain inner value or inner emotion or inner attitude or inner perspective, which is rooted in an idea that we have. It's not always easy to see, but that's the truth. Sometimes I need help in tracing back the experience, the sensation, the emotion, to the thought and to the idea that is fueling it. But that is its soul. It has an engine, and the engine is always an idea. And therefore we say that machshava, when I change my mind, I change my find. When I change my attitude, I change my reality. There's an incredible story that the Tzemach Tzedek writes. Tzemach Tzedek was a grandson of the Baal HaTanya, the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shnei Zalman of Liadi. It's actually Tzemach Tzedek's birthday is Erev Rosh Hashanah. His grandfather, the Baal HaTanya, escaped Napoleon, who invaded Russia in the summer of 1812, June 1812. And the Baal HaTanya did not want to be under Napoleon. He preferred that the Tsar would triumph over Bonaparte, and he escaped the city where he lived. Baal HaTanya lived in a city called Liadi, which is in Belarus, or it was called then White Russia. I don't know why it was called White Russia, maybe because of the snow, I'm not sure. But today they call it Belarus, and he escaped to the east. And he escaped to Russia, and then he went further into the Ukraine, and he went down south, and in the middle of the following winter, he fell ill, and he passed away at the end of 1812, December 1812, Chavdala Tevis Tovkuf Ayin Gimel. He was in a little hick town called Piena, and he was buried in a place called Hadish. And his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, tells a story. He writes this, and he says, it was Mitzvah Shabbos. His grandfather was already ill. He was ill for a few days. Seemed like he had pneumonia. And running away from Napoleon was one of the harshest Russian winters. It's known that's how Napoleon was defeated, and it cost him his life. He says, Mitzvah Shabbos, I saw how serious the situation was. And his grandfather, the Baal HaTanya, said David Ma'ariv, and he said he made Havdalah. And he said he made Havdalah b'deyat slula, with a very, very clear mind, or b'dveikus nefla, with extraordinary spiritual oneness with Hashem. Tzemach Tzedek says that he stood to David Ma'ariv. Mitzvah Shabbos, Shmois Chavdalah Tevis Tovkuf Ayin Gimel, the night of the Histalkus of the Baal HaTanya. And he said his Zayda was in bed, and he was davening Shemona Esrei in that room. I guess he wanted to be with his grandfather. And he said he davened Shemona Esrei for a very long time, and he was very, very marashchayre. He was very despondent. Perhaps he had a hunch, or more than a hunch, of what is going to happen. Tzemach Tzedek was very, very close to the Baal HaTanya, especially that he raised him. Because Tzemach Tzedek was orphaned by his mother at a very young age when he was a baby. She gave her life for her father. It's a story outside of the realm of this shir. And her condition was that her father, the Baal HaTanya, raises a Tzemach Tzedek, Reb Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch. So he was extremely close with the Baal HaTanya, and these were the last moments. And he said, I davened Ma'ariv with a tremendous sense of sadness, a very long Ma'ariv, a lot of tears, and a lot of pain, and a lot of agony, and like a certain sense of marish chayra, of despondency. He says, my grandfather waited till I finished davening. And when I finished davening, he called me over and he spoke to me. And he said to me the words that are in Zohar Parshas Tetzaveh. And he repeated to his grandson the whole piece of Zohar there of Parshas Tetzaveh, Tochazi. I want you to come see, the Zohar says. Al me'ila kegavned al metata. The higher world parallels the lower world. There are parallel universes. Our world is a mirror of a higher world. And when somebody lives a certain way in this world, it affects many other levels of reality because they're all interconnected. If I can give the example in a negative sense of the coronavirus, a little microorganism is released into the ear through a droplet, through a sneeze, through a handshake, and then what happens? It travels. It immediately travels, and it travels far, and it travels wide. So there are relationships and connections that we don't always see with our naked eye. So the Zohar says that what happens, what I do in this world, doesn't just affect what I just did right here, right now, in my environment and my body. It's like, the domino effect. You push down the domino, and many dominoes, even invisible ones, are impacted. And the Zohar says that when you show a face of melancholiness, of depression, of sadness, of dejection, down here, it's actually mirrored up there. And the person generates a certain energy of negativity. On the contrary, when a person generates an energy of joy and simcha and positivity, then that is the energy they unleash in the world, and that comes back to them. Because it travels through this world, it affects the upper worlds. And like the Baal Shem Tov said, the pasuk says, Hashem tzilcha. Hashem is your shadow. What does it mean, Hashem is your shadow? So literally it means like he's our protection, like you find refuge in the shadows. You find shade, protection from the scorching heat of the sun. But the Baal Shem Tov said, Hashem tzilcha. It's brought in Kedushas Levi numerous times in the name of the Baal Shem Tov. Kedushas Levi tells us Yaakov Yosef. Hashem tzilcha means that your shadow follows you. My shadow is a reflection of me. So he says, Hashem tzilcha kevayachal. Hashem responds to human energy, to human behavior, because we are co-creators. The Gemara says in Shabbos, Kuf Yutes, Kaloimer vayechulu nasa shutuf lakodesh baruch hu b'maisa bereishis. A person essentially has the power to be a shutuf of Hashem in the creation of the world. The Medrash says in Pirkei Rebbe Eliezer, fascinating thing, that when Hashem created the world, He surrounded it. He created like a fortress, a wall protecting the planet or the world from three sides, besides the north. The north He left open. Ruach tzvainis eina mesuveves. The northern side is not encircled. Whatever that means, what it means astronomically, cosmologically, it's not for this year. Gemara Basugim Babasra Daf Chafhei. But it says the northern side is not encircled. Why? So the Birkei Rebbe Eliezer says, so that if somebody comes and says, I'm God, so they say, really, you're God? Why don't you create a wall around the northern side? You plug the northern side, there shouldn't be a breach. It's a strange medrash. Somebody comes and says, I'm God. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe once, he gave a hadron on Maseches Shabbos, 1962, a very deep hadron. So he explained this medrash, because it wasn't a very original and creative and daring way. And he said as follows, the medrash says, in Medrash Rabbah Parshas Vayechi, that Yaakov Avinu gathered his children to his deathbed, and he said, come my children, hikafzu, gather, El Yisrael Avichem, to Yisrael your father. So the Medrash says a very fascinating interpretation. I want you to gather El Yisrael Avichem to Yisrael, who's El. El can also be read as Kale. That you gathered to Yisrael, your father, who is like Kale, because the pasuk says in Vayishlach, Vayikra lo Kale lekei Yisrael. Hashem called Yaakov Avinu Kale. Ma Hakadosh Baruch Hu b'orei elamas, af Avichem b'orei elamas. Just as Hashem creates worlds, your father also creates worlds. What does this mean? It says Mitzafain tipasach hara. From the north comes evil, because Yirmiyah Navi said that from Bavel, Babylonia, which is north from Eretz Yisrael, that's where the evil of Nebuchadnezzar came to destroy the first Beis HaMikdash. So Tzafin in Kabbalah represents a source of negativity. Ruach tzvainis eina mesuveves. Hashem did allow a breach. He allowed that toxicity should be able to feed off holiness. What's the job of the Jew? The job of the Jew is to create a fortress and not allow Ruach tzvainis, not allow negativity to get any energy from us. We have to harness all of our energy into positivity. So the Medrash says, Hashem left the northern side open, so that if somebody comes and says, I'm a creator, we'll say, go, close that. He says, and that's the Jew. The Jew who's a child of Yaakov Avinu, who's considered a Borei Olamis, we are the ones who are co-creators with Hashem, and we also create the worlds. We're the ones who plug and seal off the parasitic energy that can go from Kedusha into Klippa. So the Alter Rebbe says to the Tzemach Tzedek, back to the story, that your moods, your dispositions, your characteristics, your mental space, your emotions, and the attitude that you project into the world actually is not just you person, it's not just about you yourself. It creates a different reality, it creates a different impact. And therefore, he said, my grandfather warned me, and he says, this type of attitude and perspective is something that you must be cautious not to allow it to control your life and to dictate your life. This was the last message that he left to his grandson. And a few minutes later, around 10:25 p.m., the Tzemach Tzedek writes, he returned his soul to its maker. Indeed, the Tzemach Tzedek is the one who coined that very popular phrase in Yiddish, tracht gut, wird sein gut. Think good and it will be good, which means it's not just wishful thinking. Think good, why not? Think positive, it won't kill you. It's a good thing to think positive. And neuroscientists and psychologists tell us that our mental space and our attitudes and our moods affect our health. They affect our physical health. But it's much deeper than that. The Tzemach Tzedek was saying that consciousness is the source of matter. Matter is not a derivative of consciousness. I'm sorry, consciousness is not a derivative of matter. Matter is a derivative of consciousness. So when you tracht gut, when you think positive, you create an impact. You unleash an energy. You actually, today we know in neuroscience, some extraordinary studies, you actually recalibrate, you reformat neural pathways in your brain. You actually affect yourself, you're affected on a cellular level, but that's a big avoida. Because tracht gut is not just a fake thing, it's like, yeah, let's just think good. Tracht gut is a real inner avoida pnimis, it's an internal avoida, where a person really, really tunes in every moment to the fact that Hashem is creating this moment right now. That's the power of now. The power of now means that I am completely dedicated to now. There's not a past and there's not a future. I learn from the past, I prepare for the future, but the moment is now is, that's everything. You connect to Hashem by connecting to the moment right now, right here, right now. And in this moment, there is absolute infinite goodness because God is creating you right now, this moment, to fulfill His purpose and His mission right at this moment. It's hard because most of us, and many of us, live in the past. My mind is racing, my thoughts are busy rehashing things that happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, consciously or subconsciously, and I'm still stuck in that. But that ability to really, really be able to emancipate myself from all that and tune into the heartbeat of creation and tune into the present moment, this takes mental work and spiritual work, but it's a very, very liberating work. So when we have thoughts, when we have attitudes, it actually has a power to really have an impact on reality. It seems strange, but that's the fact that our observations and our thought processes have a direct impact on our brain, on our physiological structure, on our cellular structure, and even on structures far outside of us physically, because we are all interconnected. We're all part of a physical ecosystem, and we're all part of a metaphysical and spiritual ecosystem. Now, the concept of simcha, as the rabbi mentioned earlier, Rosh Hashanah is called a Yom Tov. Rosh Hashanah is called a holiday. And people wonder if it's a day of judgment, and it's such a serious day, and it is a very serious day, and we coronate the king. What's the simcha? Why is it called a Yom Tov? Why is it a holiday? It should be called just a very serious, introspective day. But no, we have a mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov and a mitzvah to have Sudas Yom Tov, as the Noveh and Nehemiah tells us about Rosh Hashanah. Ichlu mashmanim, ursum takim, gadol hayoim la'adeinenu. This is considered a beautiful day and a day to enjoy, a day to celebrate. But the truth is that Simcha in Judaism is not like some people think. It's a type of frivolousness. Simcha actually comes from Dveikus. The closer I am to Hashem, the more joy I feel. Because the principle is, the Pasuk says in Tehillim, we say it in the morning, Oiz v'chedva b'mkaimai. In Hashem's space, there's always confidence and there's always joy. So whenever you're in a divine space, you'll always have these two feelings. How do you know that you're in a divine space? What's the barometer? The barometer is always if you're in a place of confidence and a place of joy. If you're in a place of insecurity, a place of self-loathing, a place of mediocrity, a place of self-hate, a place of always doubting yourself and inner anxiety, or a space where there's no joy, there's just sadness and depression and negativity and toxicity, I'm not ben kaimai. I'm misaligned. There's a lack of connection. There's a dissonance. Whenever you're in the divine space, you'll experience a flow of ois and chedva, a flow of confidence and a flow of joy. Because real confidence means that I'm a conduit. I'm a conduit for something deeper. And therefore it's not about me. I don't take myself personally, but I take the cause. I don't take myself so seriously, but I take the cause seriously, and I see myself as a channel and a conduit. That's where real confidence comes from. That confidence doesn't undermine humility, and that humility is not a contradiction to confidence. And then there's chedva, ois v'chedva b'mkaimai. There's joy in his space. In the divine space, there's joy. What is joy? What does it mean to be happy? To be happy really means that I'm in tune with my purpose. Happiness doesn't mean that everything is always perfect, and there's no flaws, and there's no pain, and everything is going exactly my way. That's not what happiness is. It says, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, serve Hashem with joy. The service of Hashem is something that applies to a Jew 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, which means that simcha is a perpetual state. That's why it says, Meshenichnas Adar marbim b'simcha. So Reb Tzaddik says, because simcha is all year. A Jew equals simcha. Meshenichnas Adar marbim b'simcha. But the state of a Jew is simcha, because Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. And when you're not serving God, as the Rambam says in Hilchos Day, is Perek Gimel, when you're sleeping, you're serving Hashem. And when you're eating, and when you're drinking, and when you're engaging in business, when you're engaging in intimacy, the Rambam says there, Oivedas Hashem tamid b'chol drechecha de'eyu. So therefore, avodas Hashem is consistent, it's perpetual. So simcha is also consistent. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. Every moment of life, there's a mitzvah of simcha. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. Because there's a mitzvah of avodas Hashem. So therefore, even though the Torah doesn't give one of the 613 mitzvahs, it says a mitzvah to be b'simcha, but it's like the bedrock of avodas Hashem. Or as Rabbi Aaron Karliner once said, that depression or sadness is not a sin, but what it could accomplish to for a person, what it could do to a person in terms of damage, no other sin can do. Because for a sin, you can do tshuva. But for depression and sadness, what type of tshuva is there? I get stuck in it. So Rabbi Aaron Karlin warned about that. He also warned, he said the greatest tragedy is when a prince forgets that he or she is a prince. So what then is simcha? Simcha is something that accompanies me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's not that everything is going mamish the way I like it. Of course, everybody should have that. Everything should go exactly the way you like it, without struggle, and that would be wonderful, and I bless all of you to be able to have that bliss. But we all know that there are disappointments, there are frustrations, and ultimately a man was created to work. Adam la'amal yulad. We weren't created just to be couch potatoes and eat sushi and sunflower seeds. A person was created for toil. Adam la'amal yulad. The Gemara in Sanhedrin brings 3 shittas, if it's amal malacha, amal sicha, amal Torah, Amar Rebbe Lezer, which type of amal. But a person was created for toil, amal. So simcha doesn't mean that everything is perfect, everything is dandy. I live in a la la land. I live in a, in an amusement park where everything is always going the way I want. There's no setbacks, there's no failure, there's no frustration. That human being has not yet been created. Sheva yipel tzaddik v'kam. Even the tzaddik, as Shlomo Melech says, falls down 7 times and then rises. What then is simcha? So I think one powerful definition for simcha means, real joy means, that you're completely aligned with your purpose every moment. And that you can have every moment. In other words, I may be having a struggle. I may be experiencing a struggle. I may have to work through something that's difficult inside of me with somebody else. And it's not easy. I may have to face certain realities that will cause me pain. I may have to deal with regret and remorse, which we call tshuva. But tshuva is also a mitzvah. And if tshuva is a mitzvah, it also has to be done b'simcha. This I heard from the Rebbe myself quite a few times. He said, if tshuva is a mitzvah, it has to be done b'simcha. What's the simcha? The simcha is not that everything is perfect. If it was perfect, I didn't have to do tshuva. The simcha is that at every moment I could fulfill the purpose. That's the simcha. Very powerful idea. Tshuva means that I could fulfill the purpose. Not everything is perfect. But right now, I could fulfill my purpose. And perhaps my purpose right now is to grieve. Perhaps the purpose right now is to experience remorse. Perhaps the purpose right now is to say I'm sorry, to apologize. Perhaps the purpose right now is to glean a lesson, to learn something from it. Those are all monumentally important experiences, and therefore experiences of purpose, experiences of meaning. So simcha is the knowledge and the conviction that at every single moment of my life, I can do the right thing. And that is very deeply satisfying. Not that every moment of my life is dandy and sweet and perfect. Halavai, but that's not the case. that every moment of my life I can choose to go into the divine space and do the right thing. Whatever the circumstances are, what is the right thing? That differs from moment to moment. What was yesterday the right thing may be today the wrong thing. What is today the right thing may be tomorrow the wrong thing. I was tonight lecturing to the Jewish community in Panama. So a woman writes to me, she says, every Rosh Hashanah I go to shul, every Rosh Hashanah. This year I have a dilemma. My 92-year-old father is not allowed to go to shul because of the pandemic, coronavirus. But I always go to shul. Do I stay with him at home or do I go to shul? Great question. Of course, you know probably the answer I gave her, right? If you listen to me a little bit, you know the answer I gave her. And I said, we don't worship anything. God doesn't have an image. We don't worship a particular ritual. Sometimes going to shul is a mitzvah, and sometimes not going to shul is a mitzvah. God doesn't exist in one format, in one structure, in one mold. We don't make graven images. God exists, the Kotzker Rebbe, right? He once asked his students, who is God? Where is God? They said, everywhere. He said, wherever you let him in. Wherever you let him in. There is the channel of how you connect to God today. And that may be very different than how I connected yesterday. There's a beautiful story. There was a pandemic in Tveria, in Tiberias. This was in the days of Reb Mendele Vitebske, Reb Menachem Mendel of Horodok, the author of Priya Aretz, was one of the greatest students of the Maggid of Mezrich and a Rebbe of the Balatanya. And Reb Mendel Vitebske went into quarantine. He writes a letter that he was with his family in quarantine from after Purim till after Shavuos, just like us, after Purim, after Shavuos. He was there and he was saved. It was a crazy pandemic. A lot of people perished, but they were completely in quarantine. They remained socially distant and they survived. There was one man in the group who had this burning desire to go to the mikveh. He was a spiritual man. There was no mikveh for a few months. So he sneaked out, he left, and he went to the mikveh. And sadly, he was infected and he passed away. And they say in the name of Reb Mendel Vitebsker that he said that it's a pity that this Jew did not have emunah in the pasuk, Hashoichin itam b'seich tomoisam. Parshas Acharei Mos, we're going to read it on Yom Kippur. Hashem dwells with the Jewish people in the midst of their impurity. Because if he would have believed that pasuk, he would have known that Hashem dwells inside of this person, inside of him, b'seich tomoisam. Sometimes there's a time to go to the mikveh, and sometimes the mitzvah is not to go to the mikveh. He says, but he didn't believe it. So we don't serve Hashem in a specific way. What simcha is tuning into what the purpose is right now. And the purpose right now may be very different than the purpose yesterday. Now I may have to confront something that's ugly. That's fine. Don't get depressed. This is right now your purpose. This is your shlichus. This is your mission. This is where you're going to find your Rebbeinu Shalom. And therefore do it with confidence and do it with joy. And every moment of my life, I know I could tell myself, this is now the right thing to do. Maybe I have to make that telephone call. Maybe I have to send that message. Maybe I have to confront that demon. Maybe I have to deal with that anxiety. Maybe I have to deal with this relationship. Maybe I have to work out this contact, whatever it may be, inside of me, my relationship with others, my relationship with Hashem, my relationship with my spouse, my children. Sometimes amazing and sometimes uncomfortable. So what? Awkwardness doesn't mean you're not besimcha. Awkwardness just means you're triumphing, you're trumping a challenge that you're dealing with. And that even can cause a greater simcha. So that is simcha. Simcha is constantly being, when I'm aligned with my purpose, it means I'm aligned with my core, because I'm aligned with my mission. I'm aligned with my calling. Remember, God created me for a purpose. As long as I'm not aligned with that purpose, there is fragmentation in my life. This is deep. When I become aligned with my purpose, the outer and the inner merge into a seamless whole. There's no dissonance anymore, because my outer manifestation and my core are at peace. That's where peace of mind comes from. Peace of mind comes from unity. It comes from achdus. It comes from harmony. Realizing that we live in that world of oneness. All dissonance creates a split, and it creates dissonance in the mind. So whenever we become really, really attuned to our inner purpose, even if it's a difficult moment, there is an inner sense of joy, a joy that comes from the fact that I know that I'm serving as a conduit for the infinite oneness that is being manifested through me. And even though many of us find this difficult, and we feel that the Jewish way is more one of guilt and heaviness, but that's not the case. Especially in the teachings of all the teachings of Torah, but especially the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and his students, who constantly emphasized the need for simcha. Or as the Tanya writes in Igeres HaKodesh, Shir Aleph Laskil Chabina, V'lachein, Hirchiku Ma'od Chachmei Emes Midas Ha'atzvos. The sages of truth, all the sages of Kabbalah, were so allergic to the midah of depression, to the midah of sadness, because it represents dissonance, it represents alienation. Simcha then takes on even a deeper space. And here we come to the teaching of the Maggid of Mezrich. It's one of his stunning teachings. Elisha says in the Navi, in the Tanakh, he says, Vayihi kenagin hamenagin. Elisha says, K'chuli menagin. I need a menagin. I need somebody to play an instrument and produce music for me to be able to experience the divine. So the pasuk says, Vayihi kenagin hamenagin vatihi alav ruach Hashem. As the nagin hamenagin, as the menagin, as the singer began to sing, play, as the musician began to play the music, the spirit of Hashem rested upon him, upon Elisha. So the Maggid says, what's the Vayihi kenagin hamenagin, right? Kenagin hamenagin. So he says that there's a nagin and there's a menagin. Nagin is the niggin. Menagin was the one who's playing the niggin or singing the niggin. You say he's a menagin, and then there's the niggin. So he says, Vayihi kenagin hamenagin v'atiyah alav ruach Hashem. When the menagin became one with the niggin, that's when the divine spirit dwelled on him. You understand what this means? Let's take the instrument, the violin. The violin doesn't have an ego. The violin, when you play the violin, why is it so beautiful? The violin doesn't have an ego. The violin is not self-conscious. The violin is just a keli, it's a channel. And when you use the violin to play the music through the violin becomes one with the music. It becomes a channel for the music. Vayihi kenagin hamenagin. When that happens to the person playing the music, to the person playing the violin, to the person playing the piano, to the person playing the guitar, to the person stringing the violin, to the person playing the cello or the harp, whatever the instrument is, or the one who sings. When the menagin becomes the niggin itself. In other words, it's not me playing the instrument or me singing the song. Rather, I and the song become one. I basically become a transparent conduit through which the song flows, and my I is not there to interrupt the energy. V'atiyah alav ruach Hashem. That's when you're in the divine space. That's when you lose your self-consciousness and centeredness, and you become a conduit for infinity. I once heard from a great musician, and he said, I asked him, how do you know that your concerto was successful? He was a pianist. And he said something very profound. He said, I'm playing the piano. In the middle of playing the piano, I'm not there anymore. I'm just not there. I don't feel myself anymore. He says, then my fingers have become a conduit for the niggin, for the music itself. If I'm playing the music and I'm thinking, okay, how am I doing? They like me, they don't like me. Are they going to hire me next year? Do you think the crowd likes me? Should I go on? Should I not go on? You're interrupting the energy. It's not only true with Nagina, it's true with every art. Every art, you can ask every artist. I speak a lot. I'm a communicator. At least I try to speak. I try to communicate. I know this with myself. Sometimes I speak and I'm hearing my words. I'm hearing what I'm saying. It's not good. It happens often. I'm stuck. I'm stuck in myself. People may not always know. Sensitive people know it. Sensitive people feel it. But I'm stuck. The words are not just... There's no seamless flow. There's no transparency. Vahi kenagin hamenagin. When the menagin is not there anymore, he becomes the niggin. I'm not there. I'm not communicating. I become the communication. The Rebbe would always say, and the Rebbe said this a lot. I heard it from him quite a few times. Fascinating. He would quote a sefer from the Beis Yosef. Beis Yosef had a sefer called Magid Meisharim. You know Magid Meisharim? Beis Yosef was an interesting person. Rabbi Yosef Karo. He wrote Kesef Mishnah on the Rambam. Then he wrote Beis Yosef on the Torah. Then he wrote a Shulchan Aruch. He has Shalsha Tshuvas Efkes Reichel. But he also wrote a mystical book called Magid Meisharim. A Magid, an angel, revealed himself to the Beis Yosef. And he taught him Torah. And he wrote this up, Magid, with the dates and the dreams and the visions. It's it's unbelievable. Fascinating. So there's an expression there. Ani ha-Mishnah ha-medaberes beficha. I am the Mishnah that speaks through your mouth. In other words, his mouth became the Mishnah. Vayhi kenagen hamanagen. I'm not speaking anymore. I have become completely aligned with my source. And then everything changes. Now you're just a channel. The moment you're a channel, infinity flows through you. And that's the moment of ultimate simcha. The moment of ultimate simcha is that I'm not present. And if I'm not present, I'm completely one. When I was a bacher, I remember somebody came over to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a Chashav Rav, and he said, "Was macht der Rebbe?" Which in Yiddish means, I'm sorry. He said, "Wie filter sich," which literally means how do you feel? How do you feel yourself? So he said, the Rebbe said, "Der Schwer hat gesagt," my father was, "Am fühlt sich, es ist nicht gut." He said, "Wie fühlt sich der Rebbe?" How is the Rebbe feeling himself? So he said, my father-in-law said, if you're feeling yourself, it's not good. And he gave a beautiful metaphor. He says, how do you know if you're healthy? What's the difference? If I'm feeling my pinky, right? If I'm now having this acute sensation of my pinky, or my nose, or my hand, what does it mean? It means that there's a scratch, there's a wound, chas v'shalom, an infection. If I'm feeling my head, what does it mean? I have a headache. If I'm feeling my leg, if I'm feeling my foot, it means there's a problem, right? It's a problem. It could be sciatica, it could be a pinched nerve, whatever it is. It could be a cut, a bruise. When you're healthy, how do you know you're healthy? You don't feel your body. It should be the other way around. When you're healthy, you should feel every part of your body, but it's not true. And how about after exercise? You run for a couple hours, you exercise for a long time, right? Or you play this intense basketball game and you finish, and afterwards you feel your body? Afterwards you feel this lightness. When you're feeling heavy and lethargic, even if not sick, but just heavy lethargic, what does it mean? It means that you're not in a good place of optimal health. Why is it? So he said, because health means that your body is aligned with the soul. So your body is just a conduit for the soul's energy. The moment I start feeling my body, it's not because I'm healthy, it's because I'm not healthy. It's because the body is now occupying its own independent space, and therefore you're feeling it. So he said, as me fühlt sich is shenish gut. When you're completely in a healthy state, you don't feel yourself. You don't even feel the fact that you're not feeling yourself. You just are. You're one with the rhythm of life. You're one with the dance of life. The paradox is, the more we talk about it, the less we experience it. So, vayhi kenagen hamanagen, v'tihi alav ruach Hashem. This is the deeper component of simcha. The deeper component of simcha is, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of avodah to be able to let go of everything. And to be able to really experience yourself as a conduit. Now it's hard because in the pressures of life and in the inner pressures of life, where I have demands for myself and expectations of myself, and I'm telling all these messages to myself, it's very, very hard to let go. I'm always trying to control everything. I know this in my life, and I assume in many other lives. But really, you become free and you become most productive when you just let go. You really, really let go. Ani hamishna medaberes beficha. And you allow the energy to flow through you. Sometimes we need help. But this is where the deeper simcha comes in. You and the joy become one. The menagen becomes the nigen, v'tihel of ruach Hashem. And it's so true with educating your children. When you educate your children, you have to take your ego out of the picture. It's not like he insulted me, she insulted me, I'm going to get them back. What's this chutzpah? Because then I'm not educating. Then I myself become a child. Basically, my child is triggering me to become a child. And now it's child against child. But what happens if I can acknowledge the pain, because I'm a human, I can acknowledge the pain. I can identify it, I can give it its space. But then I can really go to a much deeper place and ask myself, what is the purpose of parenting at this moment? Ma Hashem elekecha doirish me'imach. What does God want from me at this moment? What is really this moment? And suspend everything else. What does this moment call for? Yes, feel the pain. You could feel the pain. You have to, because if not, you repress it and it haunts you. So step one is to feel the pain. But step two is to take a deep breath and to really align yourself with your purpose. And then ask myself in a very, very deep place, what's my purpose now as an adult? What's my purpose as a father and a mother? Rather than just the instinctive reaction of rage or pain or loneliness or sadness or betrayal that comes up, but I don't even know that it comes up. It just hijacks my brain and it defines me. Today, as we live in a generation and we live in a time right before the Geula Shlema, Hayom Haras Olam, this entire message becomes even more vital and critically important because we see that there's a tremendous outburst of anxiety, okay? Hands down. Wherever I go, I mean on Zoom, I'm not going anywhere, but wherever I go, whoever I talk to, this is a common question. There's so much anxiety and stress. And people want to know why. Is it all the coronavirus? And I say, yeah, the coronavirus is stressful for people, that's true. But let's face it, our grandparents and great-grandparents had much more difficult lives. Come on, we all know that. Despite our challenges today, and I'm not minimizing tragedy or anything, God forbid. But there's so much anxiety and fear and stress today. I say, maybe I'm wrong, I'm just giving you my speculation, I'm not vouching that this is authentic, I just feel that this is true, and you may agree with me, you may not agree with me, it's fine. It just resonates for me. And my wife agrees with me, so that's important. I think that right before the Geula, all the toxicity of generations comes to the surface so that we can extricate ourselves from it. That's what's happening. The trauma that you're experiencing is not just your own trauma, it's yours too. But it could also be from your mom and your baba and your elder baba and your father and your elder zayd. Many generations, Holocaust, Russia, Stalin, pre-Holocaust, pre-this, we have had a lot of trauma. And it's coming up now. It's coming to the surface. And whenever things come to the surface, it's only for you to deal with it. How do you deal with it? Sometimes you subdue it, sometimes you confront it, sometimes you transform it, sometimes you quarantine it, but you got to deal with it. You don't deny it. You deal with it. The reason you don't deny it is because Einoid Mulvadai. This is a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. Because we believe that God is everywhere and God is everything, so denying it means denying God. It's an incredible teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. When toxicity comes to the fore, I want you to understand this. When toxicity comes to the fore, denying it is denying God. Because what's coming to the fore is not just the toxicity. What's coming to the fore is the spark of God within the toxicity. Einoid Mulvada. So if it's coming to the fore, it's really God speaking to me. God speaking to me through the toxicity. Now that's very heavy. And it can be very confusing and it can be very dangerous. Okay? Tanya chapter 28, right? Al yihi shaita lasik balas amidus. You got to know when, yev, and nisht, etc. Igeres HaKodesh Chafei, he has a different approach. And it's all true. Because you have to know. Where you are, where you're not. The point here is, when the toxicity comes from the subconscious to the fore, it's a conversation of God. It's a conversation God is having with me. Now you're going to tell me that's God? The anxiety, the toxicity? No, the toxicity is not God. But the toxicity is hiding in its sparks of God. Very deep sparks. And I have to peel away the layers, the facades, and I have to excavate the truth. If I don't peel away the layers, the toxicity is just paralyzing. It's negative. It's not good. But if I peel away the layers and I look into it, there's a very deep message there, a very comforting message. It's really a spiritual alarm clock. It's alerting me to who I am, to who I could be, to who I need to be, to who I want to be, and to who I'm capable of becoming. So the Baal Shem Tov says, when this comes to the fore, it's God brought it to the fore. Hashem is there. So now it's time to deal with it. Not dealing with it is not holy. Not dealing with it is a form, it's intense, it's a form of kfirah. It's believing that God is just not here, and that we don't accept that. We don't accept it if you're a student of the Baal Shem Tov. Sorry. God is here. God is in your space always, and you're in his space. Einoid Mulvada. So we just don't accept this notion. I don't deal with it. I can't deal with it. How you deal with it, that's a good question. Sometimes dealing with it means just quarantining it. Sometimes dealing with it means acknowledging it, just acknowledging that it's there. And not falling prey to it. Realizing this is trauma speaking, this is toxicity speaking, I don't have time for it. It's not me. That itself is called dealing with it. Sometimes dealing with it means something even deeper. That depends on the circumstances and every situation, and there's a lot to say about that. But the common denominator is, it's all coming up now to the surface. You know why? Because before the Geula, we must extricate ourselves from it and extricate it from us. Nistaima avodas habirurim. The avodah of birurim comes to an end. What's the avodah? The avodah of birurim is selecting the good from the bad. That comes to an end. And basically, the trauma comes to the fore, the negativity comes to the fore, and it gives everybody an opportunity to be able to identify with what they need to identify with and not identify with what they don't need to identify with. So therefore, all this is coming now up, not to get us down, but to elevate us. Ki menasa Hashem Elokeichem eschem ladas. So we all know the Alter Rebbe's Taich, menasa from the word Arim nisi ala harim, uplift, elevate. Ki menasa Hashem Elokeichem eschem ladas. The pasuk says in Re'eh, Hashem is lifting you up. Menasa. The word nisayon means a test. The word nisayon means a miracle, nes, and the word nisayon means to uplift, like an elevated banner. It's all the same thing. A test is there to uplift you in order to help you perform the miracles of your life. Because a miracle means going out of the comfort zone and shocking myself. And therefore, all this stress is coming up for one reason, I believe, for us to be able to extricate it from our systems, to be able to cleanse ourselves, to be able to open ourselves up to real simcha. Because Geula is the time when we see the harmony, when we see the oneness, when everything is aligned with its ultimate purpose, and therefore the simcha pervades everything. So my dearest friends, as you come into Rosh Hashanah and Aseret Yimei Tshuva and Yom Kippur, these are the days of the deepest closeness. Dirshu Hashem b'yimatzei kra'u b'yoser karev. So the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, Elu asarei yamim, shebein Rosh Hashanah liyom Kippurim, Hashem calls himself present, and Hashem calls himself close. The Baal HaTanya says that during these days is kiruv hamoyer el hanitzutz. Every neshama is a spark of infinity. When you bring a candle close to a bonfire, the candle becomes subsumed in the bonfire. So when you bring a neshama close to the bonfire, to the source, the neshama becomes subsumed. It melts away in the ecstasy of infinity. So during the time of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, says the Baal HaTanya, is kiruv hamoyer el hanitzutz. The moyer, the source of all souls, comes close to the spark, to the individual flame. So what happens? The flame naturally becomes bottled, it becomes nichlel, it becomes subsumed in the moyer. In other words, this is the time of the greatest kiruv, of the greatest intimacy. Even the concept of Rosh Hashanah as a day of judgment, what is this? It's that Hashem is accentuating and identifying exactly where you are, exactly where you failed, exactly where you succeeded, and the reasons for it inside of you, to be able to help you discover a year in which you can maximize your potentials and live your life to the fullest. So at this time, there is profound simcha, there's profound joy. It's the joy of coming back to yourself. The greatest joy is the joy of tshuva. Tshuva is the joy of alignment, the happiness of living a purpose-driven life at every single moment, as discussed before. And therefore, this is the pinnacle of simcha. And really, Sukkot, Simchas Torah, is just a manifestation of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The famous expression of the Rashab, what Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur accomplish on one level, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah accomplish on a different level. One represents the direction of Aliyah, the other represents the direction of Hamshacha, but it's the same energy. The energy of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in a state of Aliyah, ascent, is the energy that's later manifested, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, in a state of descent, which is a very profound idea. It's the same energy, it's just it's going in the opposite direction. Here you're going up and here you're going down. So the simcha of Sukkot is really a manifestation and an explosion of the relationship that happened on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So therefore, as we stand at the threshold of a new year, and we stand at the threshold of a Geula Shleima B'mheira B'yameinu, this is the time that you and I need to be able to cultivate an attitude of deep simcha and joy and ecstasy and celebration. And may we indeed experience a beautiful and amazing and happy year, a year full of simcha. Tovshin Peyalav, says the Chassam Sofer, may Ashbois Yarim Evyon, Rebbeinu Shalom, will lift all the destitute from the heaps of garbage and filth, may Ashbois, from the abyss, Tovshin Peyalav, Yarim Evyon, from that Ashba, to uplift the person, to be able to experience the Ashreinu Matayv Chalkeinu, Umanoyim Geraleinu, Umayafa Yerushaseinu, Misimchoscha Shesamachta Boy, Karoses Shma Yisrael Vishurun, until that great moment when the Navi Yeshaya says, Simchas Oilam Al Rosham, eternal joy will dwell on their heads. B'mheira b'yameinu, amen. Thank you very much. And Hoshana Tova Sukkah to one and all, a Shnas Geula, a Shnas Yeshua, and a Shnas Simcha. Thank you. Right. What makes it difficult, though, you're 100% right, but you have to also realize what makes it difficult is sometimes the way people's minds are programmed to think. And that sometimes is more difficult than everything else. In other words, the gold could be right in front of me, but if I'm facing in a different direction and I refuse to face this direction, you say, it's right here, it's easy, but I can't turn around. So we have to acknowledge that in life. Sometimes it's very easy, but if my mental state is not allowing me to go there, it becomes excruciatingly difficult. But not because it's really difficult, but just because my brain has this message that it's difficult. So part of that avodah is to really open yourself up to the possibility that you're thinking about it in a wrong way. In other words, my very thought, we come back to machshava b'simcha. I really have to open myself up to the idea that what I'm calling so hard is only from my perception right now. And if I would be able to be vulnerable and have the courage to just let go and strip myself from all the facades and fake garments and just be real and authentic, like it says in Zohar, tshuva is b'shaita chada u'berige chada. It's a moment. I once heard from the Rebbe at a Fabrengen, such a taich. He said like this, the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah, that when Rebbe Elazar ben Durdaya died, the whole story of Avodah Zarah Daf Yud Zayin Yud Ches, so Rebbe cried and he said, Yesh koina ilamai b'shah achas. What does shah achas mean? 1 hour, right? This guy spent his whole life to get Olam Haba, and this guy, b'shah achas, 1 minute, 1 hour, shayin Olam Haba. The Rebbe said the word shah in Tanakh also comes from the word, it says, Vayisha Hashem el Hevel. Hashem turned. He paid attention to Hevel. Right? Lo shah love. He wasn't attentive to him. So he said, Yesh koina ilami b'shah achas. He said in Yiddish, Me ken koina sein de Welt b'shah achas. Mit ein ker. Shah means ein ker, which literally means with one turn. With one turn. Vayar Hashem kisar liris. Mit ein ker. It's a ker. A ker means turn around. It's a movement, and that movement happens in a split moment. You don't have to climb the Himalayas. You don't have to climb Mount Everest. You don't have to fly to the other side of the world. It's ein care, but that care is sometimes Mesiras Nefesh, because it may be shocking my whole comfort zone. For 45 years, or for 55 years, or for 25 years, I've been telling myself, I'm a messed up loser. I'm a depressed, traumatized soul. I'm full of guilt, and it ain't care. With that one turn, you open yourself up and you say, you know what? This is my trauma speaking.
At the end of the day, all those things and feelings that you have about yourself are just thoughts.
Yeah. Again, you're emphasizing that they have no real significance, and it's very true. But you also always have to empathize with the idea that sometimes a person does not realize this. In his world, it's not his thoughts. In his world, it's him. So we have to appreciate how hard that can be, even though it's so easy. But in his mind, it's murder. Because it's not my thoughts, it's me. It's not my thoughts. And we slowly have to be able to show this person that these are thoughts, they're not you. You have to be able to say, I am not my thoughts. I am not my thoughts. I am not my thoughts. That's why it says in Tanya, 100 places, that machshava is called levush. Thoughts are garments. They're jackets. They're ties. They're shirts. Now, I like my jacket. I think it's nice. I like my tie. I didn't buy it, but somebody else bought it. I think it's nice. But you can't get married to your tie. You don't get married to your suit. And if it gets dirty, you take it off. And even if you can't take it off because you're in the middle of a shiur, okay, so you'll sit for another half an hour with it, but then you're going to take it off. So your machshava is your garment. It's important. Garments are important. You don't go out to the street without garments. That's how we represent ourselves, to ourselves and to others. But it's a garment. I am not my garment. And if somebody spills orange juice on my suit, I may be upset. But no normal person is going to say, oh, I'm dirty forever. You're not dirty. Your garment is dirty. You're not dirty. You're not even dirty for 5 minutes. Your garment is dirty. So your machshavas are problematic. Okay. But these are things we all have to learn and we have to train ourselves in.
asking a question over here that they sent to me. They said, since we're the lowest generation, how can we carry everything from our previous generation and elevate it? Because it's related to the sex.
Good question. So the Chavos Yair writes that we are like midgets on the shoulders of giants. Kenanos al gabe yanak, meaning we may be midgets, but we're sitting on the shoulders of giants. We're not an isolated generation that emerged into history a couple of years ago. We are the continuous chain of Klal Yisrael that begins with Ma'amad Har Sinai. And each one of the Gemara has an expression in Hayri is Daf Hey, Tzibur loy meis. Individuals die. Klal Yisrael doesn't die. The same chefts of Klal Yisrael that stood at Har Sinai, that built the first Beis HaMikdash, that built the second Beis HaMikdash, that wrote the Mishnah and the Gemara, the same Klal Yisrael is still here. The individual can die. The tzibur, it's the same tzibur of Klal Yisrael. So it's the same Klal Yisrael. So we're not isolated Jews. We may be midgets, but we're standing on the shoulders of extraordinary giants who have served God for thousands of years in the most incredible ways. So what we complete is not due to our own prowess and brilliant talents. We're called Ikvus de Mashiach. Ikvus Mashiach means the heel. We're on the bottom. But it's not the bottom, it's just a heel. It's the heel that carries the whole structure of the human organism. And we carry it with the foundation, we hold on to it, and we sit on their shoulders. And therefore, you have in Shabbos a malacha called Makah B'Patish. What's Makah B'Patish? Makah B'Patish is a chiyuv skila, just like any other malacha. Makah B'Patish is one bang with a hammer. Boom! Come on. What'd you do? You did nothing, right? If you wouldn't have prepared the keli for months in advance, there would have been nothing. But the Makah B'Patish, that's a malacha. So we are the Makah B'Patish of Jewish history. We were given a hammer, and God says, give back clap. Give back clap. Get rid of the toxicity. Get rid of the Marash Chayra. Get rid of the feeling that you're separate. Give back clap. That's it. Makah B'Patish, you finish the malacha Vayichal Elikim B'Yom Hashvi Malachta Asher Asa, and you can go into Shabbos Yom Shekuli Shabbos Amnucha L'Chaya Elama. Sometimes, though, you'll forgive me, every situation, we have to always remember that every person is on their own journey, and different situations sometimes have unique ingredients to them, and I'm not sure there's always one generic statement that applies to all. Yes, we want to live in the now. Sometimes a person is haunted by certain things, and just to tell them, it's all in your mind, you have to be very careful with that. So ultimately, it's all in the mind, but in order to get there, we sometimes have to work through a lot of stuff, and we must respect the different processes of people and the different journeys of people, and sometimes people carry a lot inside of them, and it's a little more complicated than just saying, it's all in your mind. I'm just saying we have to always be very sensitive and empathetic, especially when it comes to mental health and it comes to people's journeys and struggles. Hatzlacha Rabbit, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Belanov. I know she arranged it all. And thank you to Rabbi Smith, and thank you to all the Rabbanim, and thank you for everybody participating. And should have tremendous hatzlacha. And the main thing is, everybody should have a gewaldige ksiva, v'achsim etoiva, shana toiva sukkah, begeshem, beruach, gam yachad, betoiv hanira v'anigla, a year of health, happiness, prosperity, nachas, and a year of geula, shleima, de Mashiach tzidkenu, b'mheira, b'yameinu. Amen, Ken Yehi Ratzon, Chazak. Thank you. Good night.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.